79% of millionaires are self-made, and importantly, around 90% of the most wealthy invest in some sort of property. It is for this reason I started my career in property 13 years ago, starting from nothing to now having property businesses turning over millions. And in this video, I'm going to share the 5 strategies that have worked for me and can help you get started with little to no money. Number 1, deal packaging. This is how I started, by putting in the legwork to find below market value property purchases and pair them to investors to purchase that would in turn pay me a fee. So a simple example is I would put in the legwork to find a property worth 100,000, but where the seller was willing to sell it for 80,000 if I was able to buy quickly. I'd then pass that to an investor to purchase instead, so they'd get the benefit of buying at the discount in exchange for a £5,000 fee to me. Super simple strategy, and in my early days I was putting in the hours to do a handful of these a month. Now I've got a business that generates about 100 to 200 of these for investors each month, all without me having to lift a finger. So with all these strategies, you should look to master them yourself and then ultimately transition to cultivating a team that produces the deals for you. Anyway, number 2 is joint venture. Now, rather than going through all the effort of finding great deals, great property opportunities, and then selling them on to investors to gain all the value from purchasing and owning them, you could look into joint venturing with someone with the cash to invest, but perhaps little time to manage the day-to-day of finding the property, buying them, renting them, and so on. A common setup is you put in the time, the investor puts in the money, and you split the profits. When I started, I was 22. I didn't have the confidence to do this, so I completely get why, if you're new to this, the idea of partnering with someone and having that responsibility may feel daunting. The good thing about all of this is, like me, you can start with deal packaging, and as you build confidence, transition to joint ventures as you build that confidence. There are also a lot of different formats to joint venturing. So I've got a partnership in place where we will find the opportunity, the investor will purchase and manage everything to do with that. And rather than them paying me an upfront fee for my business finding that deal, they split the profit on the back end once they've resold the property for a profit. So there are a lot of different formats to joint ventures you can consider as you develop your property career. Number 3 is rent to rent. This isn't something I focus on now, but it is something I would without doubt consider if I was starting from nothing. Quite simply, you're offering landlords the simplicity of renting their properties at a guaranteed monthly rent on a commercial lease. So the landlord doesn't need to worry about the tenants and so on. You take that on board and you then sublet the property either by the room or as holiday accommodation. So a good example is you rent a 4-bed house for £1,000 a month, for example. You either rent each room at £500 a month, so a total of £2,000 a month to make a profit, or you rent the property by the night, where typically you should be pushing to double or triple the revenue. So your £1,000 rental could then clear £2,000 or even £3,000 a month, making you a profit. The trick with getting rent to rents to work is, again, you need to source the deal. Not every property available for rent will work as a good rent to rent. And even when you filter down to the properties that would make a good rent to rent, not all landlords will want to rent to you in this way. So finding rent to rent isn't difficult, but it does take time. Now, before I move on to strategy 4, if you found this video useful, I'd personally really appreciate you liking and subscribing. 80% of you watching my videos haven't subscribed, and my goal is to try and get that down to 70%. It helps me and the channel more than you know, and means more and more people will find my videos like you have, and means that I can then invest more and more time to creating this free content for you guys at home. Anyway, number 4 is purchase lease options. Now, this is more straightforward than it sounds. Essentially, rather than with the rent-to-rent strategy, where you're looking for properties on the rental market to then rent and sublet, with purchase lease options, you are ideally looking for properties where the owners are looking to sell but aren't able to find a buyer. A classic example of this is if a property is in negative equity. So someone might have bought a house for £100,000 with a £90,000 mortgage. The property has then gone down in value and is now, say, worth £85,000. But the owner is trying to sell the property at the £90,000 to cover their mortgage. So of course, this is a really, really tough spot for sellers in the situation. And sadly, with the property market being tough at the moment, with house prices dropping, there are more and more people in this sort of situation. This ultimately creates an opportunity for you to offer them a solution. You can agree to purchase their property for the £90,000 they need, but not pay today. You can agree to pay in, say, 5 years into the future, and in the meantime, agree to rent the property for a guaranteed amount that covers their mortgage and all their property costs between now and when you buy it in the future. That way the owner can move out, not have to worry about the property, the mortgage, and so on. You can then rent the property to make a profit from the tenant paying you more than you're paying the owner. Then in 5 years' time, when the property market isn't worth 85,000, but is perhaps worth 100 or 110,000, you're able to purchase the property at the agreed 90,000 at below value at that stage. This strategy creates such a great win-win for all parties, but of course, not every property is going to fit this sort of solution. Again, the trick is in putting in the work to finding these opportunities. And finally, number 5 is option agreements. Now, I think option agreements are probably one of the most underused tools in property, and often when they are used, they are misused. Simply the way it works is you pay for the option to purchase a property at a certain price within a certain time period. So, for example, if I found a house worth £100,000, but the seller has agreed to sell it to me for £80,000, I could say that I'm not able to purchase the property at the £80,000, but I'm confident I can pair the property to an investor to purchase. I could pitch to buy the option to purchase their property at £80,000 for a period of 3 months, for example, for £500. So the seller would get that £500. This allows me the exclusive right to then find an investor to purchase as high above the 80,000 as possible, say 90,000, pocketing the difference of that £10,000. If I'm unsuccessful, then I've lost that £500 I paid for the seller for the option. Now, there are a lot of instances where rather than paying £500 for the option, you can pay £1 for the option. Ultimately, you have to create a scenario that is win-win for all parties for it to work. Another good example is with larger development opportunities, especially things like plots of land. You can purchase the option to buy a plot of land for a period of 6 months, for example. That allows you the time to see if you can get the planning without worrying about the plot selling to someone else. If you get the planning, you then have the legal right to purchase the land at the pre-agreed price, knowing you can get the planning. If you can't get the planning, you've lost the option fee, but you haven't had to take the risk of buying the plot up front. In conclusion, what is the secret to success in property? It constantly surprises me how little known these strategies are to so many of you out there, and how no matter how you cut it, one of the secrets to making a real success in property with no money is getting really good at sourcing great deals. Or if you're unable to source great deals but have the money to invest, working with property sourcers that can find you those great deals for a fee. See you in the next video.